any writer is so deeply grateful when a reader engages with their work. And mind the verb there, engages. It is a back and forth. And I understand from talking to some of your professors who have shared some of the reactions that you had to the book. Let's say that not everyone has agreed with everything that they read in that book. But that's what engagement is about. And all an author can ask is that you engage with the text. That you read the text and you take it seriously. Part of what you're being invited to learn here at this great university, but in particular in this honors program, and very particularly in this this class on critical thinking, is to think critically, which is not to be confused with thinking negatively or pejoratively or in some way combatively. Thinking critically is really about thinking with discernment. Reading, engaging the text, letting the text push you, perhaps, to think in new ways, to reconsider what you have come to the text believing, to push back against the text. I heard, by the way, that some of you had begun to fact-check my fact-checking, which I thought was terrific, by the way. Going to look at the notes. That is the work of a true scholar. So often today, I think people look at the people in my business, the media, and it's one of two extremes. Either you don't believe a thing that you're being told, or you believe way too much of what you're being told. And any of you who have been fact-checking this book, I genuinely applaud you, because that is the right attitude to take towards everything that you are being told by your media, by your government, by your teachers, by your parents. You are now at a point in your life where you are no longer children. You are on your way to becoming adults, and you are going to be thinking and deciding for yourselves. And the best way to do that is with that kind of critical, discerning, challenging but open-minded approach to learning. And so to be part of that, for me, I just want to say, is truly an honor. So I want to thank the dean, and I also want to thank that gentleman way in the back there who's very modestly standing with his arms folded. Now he's going in prayer. Bring you back. So, truly, thank you all for taking the time to read this, however you feel about it. It's really an honor to meet with you. And I just want to say, kidding aside, that and I say this to every audience, not just you, please feel free to disagree. And when we get into the discussion, Q&A later, please feel free to disagree. And also, I think there's a session tomorrow morning to which you're all invited, where we'll have a chance to talk again and to maybe go into more depth. Please feel free to disagree. And don't be intimidated by the fact that, I've written a book. I always say you get extra credit if you disagree. Okay? Because that's how you make progress in thinking and in knowledge. That's the whole basis of the scientific method, is to be willing and able to challenge. But let's do it, as the dean said, without being personal. There's no need to personalize this stuff. I think, speaking again as a journalist, that's one of the great failures of my profession in recent years. political discussions through the media and in town meetings or in church or what have you, where you could have different points of view, and it was not personalized, and it was not you're in your corner and I'm in my corner. There's no need for that, and I think it actually gets in the way of true knowledge and understanding. So I guess what I try to do is I will never back down from being willing to disagree, but you can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that's something that a lot of our politicians, and frankly a lot of my colleagues in the media, could stand to be reminded of, to disagree without being disagreeable. So I really do hope that we'll be able to have Q&A later, and I think that there's going to be microphones here so that you can speak as well. And as I think about all this critical thinking, I can't help, this is official confirmation, by the way, that I'm middle-aged now, but I remember so well my very first semester in college, and it was about the best time of my life, because I went to university and I discovered this seemingly endless opportunity to learn what I wanted, to read as much as I wanted in whatever field it was, to study this or that, whatever it was that took your intellectual fancy. And I was thrilled. I felt like I had finally arrived in this place that I didn't know existed, but felt like home. And so to see all of you here in that same period of your life, I hope that you have that same kind of experience. You have the next 4 years of your life in which you will be able to read as much as you want, take advantage of that. I know it's probably not what you want to hear in some ways, but there will be very few other times in your life where you will have the intellectual freedom that you have in these next 4 years. And the other thing, and this is a very middle-aged thing to say probably, but don't feel that you have to specialize too quickly and decide what you're going to do when you get out and be thinking about your career. Your career will take care of itself if you do your part and study hard and stay open to intellectual things. Find out what it is that you enjoy doing, what kind of knowledge excites you, and that's probably the best place for you to go. Because it's very hard to know when you're 18 or 19 or 20 exactly what it is that you're going to want to be doing when you're 30 or 35 or 40. And I know a lot of the young people that I went to college with they were very clear on going to med school, or going to law school, or whatever it was, and they had decided that before they started their first day of undergraduate. And God bless them, I hope that they found happiness, but I know many people who I came across when they were 29, 35, and 43, who had done that, thinking that law school was the way to go, or engineering was the way to go. And they followed the rules, and they did the drill, and they got out there, and they started making money, but they were profoundly unhappy with it. And they didn't know, I really wish I had studied, or I wish I had gone with whatever it was, art or history or geography. So one of the things that you're going to be learning through critical thinking is to think critically also about your choices in life, and to take advantage of this freedom that you have in these 4 years. With these professors, so I had the pleasure of having lunch with a lot of your professors today. And at the risk of sounding very sentimental, I think they're pretty fond of you. I see a smile down there from one of them right now. I can tell they're very fond of you. They want to help you be the best that you can be. And they will go to the ends of the earth, I'm sure, to do that. So you have a start by saying that some of your professors did share with me once today some of the reactions that you had to the book. And I'll confess that I was a little surprised when I got the call from Richard about coming to LSU, that a book like this about climate change would be considered for this honor to be the book that all of the honor students are required to read. Because I've done a lot of reporting here, and I certainly know the history of your state and how the state has long been deeply entwined with the oil and gas business, not just economically or environmentally, but politically and even socially and culturally. I don't think there's too many other states that have the petroleum, what do you guys call it, petroleum and shellfish, is that it? And shrimp, petroleum shrimp festival. That's unique in the United States. So, I get it that some of what you may have read in this book was probably tough to hear. And I think the best way to talk about that is let's just talk about it and have it out in the open. Let's not pretend that that's not an issue. I think it's the best way forward, and I just want to assure you that there's absolutely, in what I write, there's nothing personal that is criticizing people at a personal level for their involvement in the oil and gas industry. My job as a writer and as a journalist is to get as close to the truth as I can by marshaling facts. And the facts are the facts, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion. That goes without saying. But you're not entitled to your own facts. And sometimes the facts that we face in life are not comfortable. And one of the facts that I try to bring out in this book is that it really is the burning of fossil fuels that primarily is the cause of global warming and climate change. And while that would not be a controversial statement in the rest of the world, it is still a controversial statement in some parts of this country. And I understand that Louisiana is one of those places in this country where that gets people's backs up a little bit. Now, I don't know how many of you remember reading, but there's a passage pretty early in the book that talks about how, this is not just Mark Hertsgaard saying this, and it's not even just the world scientists who are saying this. The oil and gas industry itself said this to itself, privately, secretly. Is there anybody in this room who read Hobbes so carefully that they remember the incident that I'm referring to? If so, please raise your hand, and I guarantee you'll get extra credit from the professors. You right there, young. Yes, you raised your hand. Now you have to tell us. But please stand up so that we can hear you. And if anybody has the mics, you can bring them forward now. If they don't, it's okay. Just shout loud. Excellent. Excellent. Let me read it out here so everyone can hear it. It is page, tell us, is it not 13? Page 13. Page 13. The Global Climate Coalition. Anybody remember that? Sounds like a group that's going to be against global warming, right? Alas, no. The Global Climate Coalition was formed by the nation's biggest oil, coal, and oil companies in the 1990s to fight the efforts to deal with global warming. This was after James Hansen, the NASA scientist, had warned about it. It was after Vice President Al Gore had made a lot of noise about it, and it looked like something could happen in Washington, D.C. So the industry was trying to fight it, and they created something called the Global Climate Coalition. And that coalition, the coalition's own scientists scientific advisors informed the coalition's leadership in 1995. My friends, that is 18 years ago. That the science behind global warming was, quote, well established and cannot be denied, unquote. That's the oil industry's own scientists talking privately to the oil industry's leadership. And so what did the oil industry do about that? The Climate Coalition's board of directors responded by ordering that the scientists' judgment be removed from the coalition's public statements. How many people remember that passage quote? Now that it's been read. So, as I say, it's not Mark Hertsgaard, it's not Greenpeace, it's not Al Gore who's saying this problem is real. It's the oil industry's own scientists saying 18 years ago, and then having the oil industry leadership censor that information. Now you all need to think about that, because it is your future that they thereby put at grave risk. Because by censoring that information, and by continuing in the years since to pretend that there is scientific debate around this, and indeed to spend millions and millions of dollars funding politicians and think tanks and public relations groups and journalists, or at least media organizations like Fox News, to pretend that there is this scientific uncertainty. What the oil industry achieved was a delay in dealing with the problem. And so for 18 years we continued to spew carbon emissions into the atmosphere. And as you know, if you've read Hot, that means that your generation is faced with real difficulties. Is faced with the certainty that you will live under temperatures hotter than our civilization has ever experienced on this planet. They did that knowing. This also relates to this myth that I hear a lot, that somehow believing in global warming is liberal, political, which is, at some level, is quite baffling to me, I must say, because as a reporter, I've reported on this issue all over the world, and I can tell you, it is seen that way only here in the United States, and indeed only in certain parts of the United States, inside of the Beltway in Washington, D.C., and in certain parts of the country, and in much of the Republican Party, at least at the national level. There's this idea that somehow to believe in global warming is to be a liberal. That there's liberal scientists, or there's liberal science, and then there's sound science. And I just can only repeat to you that it is only in the United States that it's seen that way. And let me give you a quick example. I mentioned this in the book, so that you're not hoodwinked by that argument. The two countries in Europe that, in my 20 years of reporting on this issue, that are clearly the leaders on green energy, clean energy, and these questions, are Germany and Britain. And they are largely motivated by their concerns about climate change. In both of those countries, the work on climate change is going forward under governments that are to the right, not to the left. So you look at Germany right now, it's been run for a very, very, very long time now by the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU, which is a right-of-center party. Do they question the science about climate before that by the Labour Party, but not long before that also by the Conservatives in the 1990s when the oil industry was censoring reports. There was a conservative government in Britain that was demanding that the Democratic government, the Democratic Party government in Washington, D.C. be tougher. Did they question science? No. The science was the science. Now, they argue about what you do about the science. You know, what do we do about climate change? How do we pay for it? That's a political discussion. Do we tax the rich? Do we tax the corporations? Do we tax the people? Do we not tax? Do we what? Those are all fair game on the political front. But the idea that you would question the science and say, oh, you must be a liberal if you believe in that science, frankly, that is laughable to the rest of the world. And, you know, you guys are growing up at a time when, if you're thinking just purely in terms of your own careers, you know, it's a global economy now, baby. And you better be able to compete at the global level. And if you're going to compete at the global level, you cannot afford to indulge in that kind of silliness, to think that somehow this science doesn't count because there's liberals who believe in it. That's just not going to cut it. And indeed, if you look at, I mentioned Germany, China. You know, China is a very complicated place on this issue, and I speak as I think the first Western writer to have gone into China almost 20 years ago and write about the environmental crisis. So I've watched it closely over time. And yes, China is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases, but their leadership gets it about the dangers of climate change, and they also get it about the importance of going to alternative energies. And although you do not read about it or hear about it in the American media, China is way ahead of us in many respects on this. There's 20 million homes now in China that have solar hot water. Wind is going ahead in China. Now, they're also still building coal plants, but the point is that they see, as the German government sees, that clean energy is going to be one of the chief economic sectors in the 21st century economy. And if you want to be a prosperous nation in the 21st century, you need to be able to compete in that realm. And as one source in Hot says, it's very hard to deal with a problem that you don't want to admit exists. And it really is only in this country that we still are burdened by that belief. And I think it's a great shame, and I hope that you know, we can engage in any kind of discussions there. But the people who keep saying that this is some kind of liberal hoax, I don't get them. You know, every scientific body in the world now has been saying for a decade with increasing clarity and urgency, bordering on alarm. And you have one of the world's leading climate scientists here in this room tonight, by the way, who can speak to this. You know, the scientists are very, very alarmed about this now. And there's 18 National Academy of Sciences in the world. Our National Academy of Science, the British, the Canadian, the Germans, the French, the Brits, the Italians, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Brazilians, on and on and on. They have all said this repeatedly. So to the people who say that this is somehow a hoax or a liberal political plot, again, apply critical thinking there. What does that imply? That implies that all of those scientists who are saying this, and who have been saying this for years, if it's not true, they're one of two things. They're either grossly incompetent, or they are outrageously dishonest. They're either lying to you, or they're incompetent. And all of them are, right? Because they're all saying this. Does that really make sense to you? Think about that. Because it's your future that is going to be dependent upon that. And in some ways, since I'm here in Louisiana, state would fall for that. Partly because you have such great opportunities in this sector, in this sphere, if you only reach out and grab it. Louisiana can be a leader in not only in clean energy and turning down the heat on climate change and reducing emissions, but also on living with the climate change that we're already locked into. New Orleans, after Katrina, and indeed the entire south of Carolina, of Louisiana, offers a real object lesson for the rest of the world that you could sell. You can sell that expertise to the rest of the world. Okay, here's how we have been dealing with the threats of rising sea levels and rising temperatures and strong pick up afterwards. You pick up afterwards. If I see you paying attention for the rest of the day. So, I just had a conversation with one of your classmates. Nick, where are you, Nick? Now, Nick, I want to thank him for taking me at my word when I said it was absolutely okay to disagree and to counter. And we were talking about the science of this, and it was actually very much related to the point I was trying to make when that false alarm went off. Which is that, as I say, all of the world's national academies of science. You all, how many people here know about the National Academy of Sciences? Like our Supreme Court of science, in the sense that they're the body that the Congress looks to, that the government looks to, and that private industry looks to as the definitive voice on scientific matters. And it was created by Abraham Lincoln many years ago, but most countries now have the equivalent of a National Academy of Science. In Britain, it's called the Royal Society, and a lot of countries have it. And when I was talking a few minutes ago, I said that 18 of the world's leading national academies of science have come out and said, repeatedly now, not just once, but they have said that basically what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said, that climate change is real, it's man-made, it's happening now, and it poses profound risks to human civilization if we don't do something about it. And on the break there, Nick came up and said, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And he mentioned a number of different objections. And including, for example, sunspots. And those of you who are scientists, you know what sunspots are. And it's something that basically a lot of scientists have said, well, maybe that's why Earth's temperature has been changing, because of different amounts of energy coming from the sun. And the fact of the matter is that, yeah, that does play a role. And the scientists have looked at that very extensively, and they came out about 2 years ago now, with an analysis that actually pinpointed how much sunspots played a role in the warming. And it is a definite role, but it is a very tiny role. It's somewhere between 4 and 8% of the overall warming over the last 100 years could be related to sunspots. And I won't belabor it, but Nick offered 1 or 2 other examples. And I said that these were very familiar examples to me, because I've heard them. They come off of the same sort of talking points memo that you see coming out of fossil fuel industry front groups and right-wing politicians. And the problem with them is that they may sound plausible if you haven't done the scientific research, but that 98% of the world's scientists disagree with those assertions. And they disagree not on the basis of their personal opinion, they disagree on the basis of years of scientific research and argument, by the way. And those of you how many people here are physical science majors, or plan to be a physical science major? And chemistry, biology, that sort of thing. Raise your hands a little higher so I can see if you don't mind. So, as you probably already know, and you'll certainly learn in the next 4 years, scientists are not afraid of disputation. That is the nature of the scientific method, is that if somebody says, I can prove X, it is in the nature of the scientific method for another scientist to say, oh really? Well, I'm gonna prove you wrong. That's how you advance in science. That's how science advances and how the individual scientist advances. So, when there's 98% of the scientists who believe a certain point of view, which is in this case that climate change is man-made and all the things that you've read about in this book, that's about as close to unanimity as you can get. You know, that is a stronger view than exists on most of the major scientific questions facing us. And so I finally, and Nick said, well, I just don't believe that. I think that, you know, that what we're seeing here really fits with natural cycles. And I said, well, that's interesting, because do you then think that you know more than the 98% of the scientists who say otherwise? And Nick, to his credit, said, well, I need to see proof of that 98%. And so I'll send you, if you give me your email later, I'll send you the paper on that. But it makes the point that I was trying to get at earlier, that everyone, of course, is welcome to their own opinions, but you're not welcome to your own facts. And the fact that 98% of the world's practicing scientists have looked at this question in great detail and have repeatedly concluded that climate change is real and that it's dangerous. As the oil industry scientists said back in 1995, if you choose not to believe that, it seems to me, as a matter of logic and reason, that you are arguing implicitly that those 98% of scientists, they're either dishonest or incompetent. What other option is there? So, if you go down that road, good luck. You better bring the numbers. You better bring some data. You better be able to prove that those 98% are wrong. And if you can do that, there's a Nobel Prize waiting for you. Seriously, if you can overturn this in a way that stands up to scientific challenge and isn't just something that gets repeated in the right-wing blogosphere, there is a Nobel Prize waiting for you. So, good luck. We have been deprived of some of our time, so I'm going to, I think, shrink my remarks and finish in 5 minutes here, and then we can talk. One of the things I was able to talk to a couple of your reporters here today and yesterday with the Revelation and Tiger TV. And can I just add, now you guys are all freshmen, so maybe you haven't decided yet, but how many people here watch Tiger TV? How many people here know what Tiger TV is? How many of you watch it? Okay, well I guess I spent a good hour today talking about Tiger TV. I know we're going to watch it, but anyway, the point being that both of these reporters asked, most of their questions were on the following theme, and it's something that I hear a lot every time I'm out in public, which is, what can we do? What can we do? Let's leave aside the arguments for a moment about, how dangerous it is. We can get to that later. But if you were to accept that it is dangerous and needs to be dealt with, what do we do? And that is something that I think is hard for a lot of people to ask, and it's probably part of the reason that a lot of people deny climate change, because it seems too hard to do anything about. And here I'm speaking about my peers as parents. It baffles me. And in fact, after I've written this book, and as you know, I wrote this book from the perspective of a new parent, it baffles me how quiet most parents in this country, and indeed around the world, have been on this issue. So I'm not pointing the finger at you when I say that people have been in denial about this. So what can you do? I have a real easy 3-step suggestion of what we do. The first thing to do is what we started to do tonight, and by reading a lot, which is to start educating yourself about this and start talking about it with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors, with your church, wherever it may be. educating yourself beyond what you're hearing in the mass media coverage. Because frankly, my profession should be embarrassed by the poor job that in general they have done on this issue. So you really do have to reach beyond what you're going to get on television, especially, and even in most newspapers, to understand this. You have to at least read a book or two, and then start to talk with one another about it, with your family and so forth. Get familiar with it. It's no coincidence that the places in the world, you know, when I write about this, the places in the world that are the most well prepared for climate change are places like King County, Washington, and the Netherlands, and others who got the science on this very early, 1990, and they started taking action then. And it's not too late for Louisiana to do the same, but it sure would be a lot better if it would have happened long ago. So start learning about it and talking about it. That's step one. And the second thing about what to do is going to sound really obvious and maybe even dumb, but I think it's actually fairly profound, which is do something. Do something beyond talking about it, beyond thinking about it. You must do something. And if you do that, you will be ahead of what most people are doing. It's one thing to be concerned about an issue, worried about that issue, express an opinion about that issue. That's all to the good, but at the end of the day, it does not change much. What you really need to do is to do something. And what that is, there's many options, but by far the most important decision that you will make in terms of deciding what to do is to do something. And you start with something that feels right to you. And it very well may be, for many people, it is a change in your personal habits, a change in your lifestyle, so that you yourself, or your family, or your household, or your church, or your school, is doing more to prepare for climate change and to fight climate change. So maybe you don't use the car so much. Maybe you start to use a bicycle for some of the trips that you don't need a car for. Or you start to recycle more. Or you think about different kind of a career, that instead of going to work for ExxonMobil, maybe you go to work for the Natural Resources Defense Council. All those kinds of things, personal choices that affect this. But do something. And then the third is that you need to do something with other people and to get involved in the political process. None of us can do this alone. It takes others. And at the end of the day, lifestyle changes, as important as they are not going to cut it. We have got to change the policies, the business policies, the economic policies, the political decisions that are driving this problem. You know, personally, I have not owned a car in 20 years. And I do that partly because of my environmental beliefs. But I don't kid myself into thinking that that's somehow going to solve the problem. I do that because that's my personal moral choice. I feel better about my life doing that. But I know darn well that alone, and even if 10 million other people did it, would not change things very much, as long as we've got national policies that essentially allow greenhouse gas pollution into the atmosphere for free. Right now, it is free to pollute the atmosphere with greenhouse gases and to ruin your future and the future of my daughter and the other 2 billion young people around the world that I call Generation Hot. Generation Hot. You're a member of Generation Hot. And you are the generation that, because we didn't deal with this problem sooner, you are going to be dealing with the hottest temperatures that human civilization has ever known in our 12,000 years of civilization. So we need to turn that around quickly, and that requires acting in ways that change the big policies, the big levers includes, above all, we need to put a price on pollution or to regulate that pollution. We don't let companies put unlimited amounts of arsenic or mercury into the atmosphere. We penalize them. We limit it by regulation, and if they break the regulation, we fine them. But we make them pay extra money. None of that exists yet for greenhouse gas emissions. We need to change that. And if you change that, you will be amazed at how fast all of the genius of American capitalism will turn on a dime, and you will see lots of companies producing green cars and solar panels and so forth, because the economics will change. So we need to do that, but that means that you've got to get involved with politics. You've got to elect different people or push the elected officials who are in there now to make different policies. Now, I can hear and even see on some of your faces when I mention the word politics, a certain level of resignation, almost disgust, skepticism, etc. Oh, I'm not interested in politics. Fair enough. But politics is very interested in you. And whether you know it or not, those political decisions are defining a lot of your future. And not just on climate change, by the way. I'm sure some of you know people who have, peers of yours who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those are political decisions. And whether you support those wars or oppose those wars, those were made by political decisions. And a lot of our fellow countrymen and countrywomen have sacrificed mightily in the service of those political decisions. So politics is very interested in you. And if you want to protect yourself in the face of politics, you better get active. And the great thing about that is that getting active can be really, really fun. And it's fun because you can win. And this is something you don't hear a lot about, but there have been some great victories on the climate front. In fact, one of them happened too late for me to include it in hot, and it's one where people your age, college students, have been at the forefront of the climate battle, especially in stopping coal, which if you remember that part of hot, coal is by far the most climate destructive conventional fossil fuel. And in this country, over the last 10 years, grassroots activists, including a lot of college and university students, have basically stopped all new coal plant construction. 168 coal plants that were planned were blocked from starting, largely by grassroots opposition. And interestingly enough, it was happening in the supposedly red states of the South and the Midwest. Now, you didn't hear about this, partly because it didn't happen inside Washington, D.C., where the media is focused. It happened in all these different little individual communities. It happened over time. It wasn't one big event. But I wrote a piece, you can find it on my website. I wrote a piece about a year and a half ago in Mother Jones magazine, describing this victory. And it shows that people power, activism at the local level, doing things like writing to your state legislature and protesting on the governor's front lawn and going to see the editorial board at your local paper and your state paper and talking to them about these issues and attending these ungodly, boring, but very important public utility hearings and working with state and local officials. The mayor of Dallas, Texas, a woman who's one of the leaders of this fight, that citizens can still win. It's very hard to win in Washington, D.C., because in Washington, D.C., the big money has basically got a lock on most of the big decisions. They don't always get their way, but they have what amounts to a veto over anything that they don't really like. And you see that with the climate legislation that was defeated during Obama's first term. But this victory over coal was just as consequential as that climate legislation would have been. Stopping 168 coal plants prevented as many emissions as that legislation promised to prevent. And now, of course, one of the big fights is the Keystone XL pipeline. I think people have heard about that issue. Of course, that's supposed to end up down here in the Gulf region. That's another case where inside of Washington, all the so-called people in the know said, oh, that's a done deal, it's going to happen. You can't stop it. And these local activists said, oh yeah, watch us. Watch us stop it. And they have built